this,
Oh, okay.
and when it's red, you're live.
Thank you.
I just received word from Treasurer's staff. He's on his way here, so he should be here in the next couple minutes. So just a quick update.
Okay, so we'll call to order this meeting of the Tennessee Advisory Council on Workers' Compensation on September 24, 2025 at 2 p.m. thereabouts in the Cordell Hull Building, House Hearing Room 3. I'm David Lillard, Tennessee State Treasurer and Chair of the Council. I welcome you to this meeting. We'll ask Kev McNellis, our Executive Secretary, to call the roll.
Bob Pitts,
Here.
J.V. Thompson,
Present.
Wes Stowers,
Here.
Jason Denton,
Here.
Paul Schaefer, Ronnie Neal,
Here.
Dr. Sam Murrell, Doug Markham,
Here.
Dr. Richard Cole, John Harris, Sandy Fletchell, Brad Burnett,
Here.
Lynn Lawyer, Greg Ramos,
Here.
Senator Paul Bailey, Representative Kevin Vaughn, Administrator Troy Haley,
Here.
Commissioner Carter Lawrence. Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
All right, Chair declares a quorum present. Next item is item 3, review and approval of the minutes of the Advisory Council's meeting on November 14, 2024. Any corrections, changes, discussion points on those minutes?
Move that be approved
All right,
and
Mr.
offered.
Mr. Pitts moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. And any discussion? Seeing none, we'll just do this by voice vote of the voting members of the council. All those members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the matter is approved. Next item is item number 4, the 2025 Workers' Compensation Product and Compliance Review presented by Zach Crandall, Director of Policy Analysis for the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. Come forward, sir. Thank you. You state your name and your title, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Zach Crandall. I'm the Director of the Policy Analysis Section for the Department of Commerce and Insurance. I'm doing fine this afternoon. It's my first time presenting to the council, but I have had the opportunity to attend many of these. I've had the opportunity to attend many of these meetings in the past. And I know several members on the council have been enjoying the data presented by the department in years past. Note that we do have an extra presentation following mine from NCCI that will be covering much of those same data points, as that is where we drew our data from. So you'll hear directly from the source today.
Okay.
So I just want to start out with a brief overview of how the department interacts with workers' compensation. Specifically, my section is rates and forms. So what we do is we review forms, which are the consumer-facing documents, policies, endorsements, anything attached thereto. We examine those for compliance with state laws and regulations. Rates, the loss cost filing that we're here to discuss today, loss cost multipliers, individual rating plans from insurers. We're examining those for actuarial soundness, and we're ensuring that rates are neither inadequate, excessive, nor unfairly discriminatory. My section also maintains the anti-fraud plans for all workers' comp insurers. Several other sections within the department we work closely with in regulating these products. Our financial analysis team is responsible for admitting insurers, of course, to do business in Tennessee, and they monitor the solvency and the financial stability of these companies throughout the year. They work with our examinations team and my team to ensure that these companies do remain solvent and financially stable, and so to ensure that they're able to continue to provide coverage to Tennessee policyholders. They are also responsible for admitting self-insured employers, which I'll discuss a little bit later here. Our examinations team provides a review every 5 years for domestic insurers. We have 3 domestic insurers here in Tennessee that cover workers' comp insurance. That is SteadPoint, Premier Group, and Mid-South Mutual. We did have 2 examinations last year. Mid-South Mutual is undergoing examination this year. We do post the results of those examinations publicly on our website. You will be able to see those next year. They take a bit of time before they're released publicly. So I have here some numbers from my section. In 2024, last year, we received 207 filings for workers' compensation insurance. 117 of those were rate filings. We are on track to receive roughly a similar amount this year. The important thing to note here is our average turnaround time, which is the amount of time it takes us to review a product, has decreased by 3 days, and that has been an effort from my section to increase speed to market for insurers, ensure that there's greater efficiency within the department. And this number in particular is due to the efforts of our workers' compensation filing analyst, Jessica Thomas. She does an amazing job. She's here today. So thank you, Jessica, for putting in a tremendous effort and getting that turnaround time decreased. To put these numbers into perspective, my section receives roughly 6,000 filings a year. So 207 is but a small part of that, but it is a very important part. Workers' compensation, as you all know, is very unique from other lines of business and very deserving of our attention here today. That's why we're here. And to cover some interesting topics that are occurring throughout the workers' comp industry. Today, I wanted to speak on artificial intelligence briefly and other emerging technologies that might impact workers' comp going forward. Now, AI is a hot topic, not just within the workers' compensation industry, but all of insurance, and most industries across the nation are dealing with this emerging technology. Now, it's very much in its infancy, but workers' compensation insurers are utilizing it through claims triaging, fraud detection, analyzing vast data sets to derive new predictive analyses and insights that they couldn't perceive previously. It's also being used in risk analysis. Now, we're keeping a close eye on it. The department, of course, monitors emerging developments. We go to national meetings. We speak to regulators from other states as to how they're dealing with new situations. We speak to insurers and industry, and they're telling us, this is how they utilize these technologies. So it's very much a new topic that we're still learning about, and we're still watching its development as it grows. Some workers' compensation specific technologies. Of course, the increased use of telemedicine has increased greater access to healthcare and lowered healthcare costs, which will have an impact towards workers' compensation. Specifically, wearable devices and biometric devices on job sites are making an appearance, and I think this will have a greater impact at making safer work environments. These monitor strenuous activity. They monitor when an employee might be overexerting themselves and bringing themselves to the point of injury. These technologies are useful for corroborating claims when they occur, and they can be useful for both supervisors and employees, and ultimately provide a safer work environment. And they could be encouraged through the use of discounts by insurers as we go forward. There's been a growing increase in the coverage of mental health and PTSD. Here in Tennessee, we have the James Dustin Samples Act, and this act provided workers' compensation coverage for PTSD under certain circumstances for firefighters. This was recently expanded to law enforcement personnel and emergency medical responders this year. There was a recent medical marijuana study in utilizing medical marijuana in place of prescription opioids. Now, studies had found that generally there was a quicker return from disability through the use of medical marijuana and, of course, lower healthcare costs. Now, this obviously faces extensive legal and legislative hurdles, especially here in Tennessee, currently we only permit the use of CBD oil that is non-psychoactive, which is less than 1% THC. We did have recent legislation that had failed in the legislature just this year regarding the introduction of medical marijuana within the state. I know I said I was going to leave the data to NCCI, but I wanted to briefly touch on premium volumes. The voluntary market, self-insured, single employers, the workers' compensation residual market plan all saw decreases from 2023 to 2024. The self-insured pool, we have one. They did increase, and that is likely due to payroll increase. So for the others, that is a demonstration that frequency of claims are down. There are fewer injuries in the workplace. Workplaces have been and are safer environments than they were in the past. And the workers' compensation market does remain profitable at this time. And to further emphasize that point, we've had 11 straight decreases over the past 11 years for loss cost filings. Now here you'll see the NCCI filed rate, which we're discussing today, the advisory council's recommendation there in the middle, and of course the department's approved rate. Last year, we were all in agreement at a decrease of 3.6%. If only every year could go so smoothly, fingers crossed. In the opposite vein, individual loss cost multipliers, which are filed by insurance companies themselves, these adjust the loss cost filing to account for those specific company level operation costs, administration costs, their profit level, their company specific items that might have an impact. These have seen a steady increase year over year for the past 10 years. And this is in line with inflationary measures or efforts, inflationary effects, sorry. And it is in line with rising operational costs, and it is in line with the fact that administering claims has increased over time, and it has become more expensive to complete a claim. So while frequency of claims is down, severity of claims has steadily increased. Now, briefly, we do still have one self-insured pool. That would be the Tennessee Automotive Association. We do have a new self-insured single employer entity this year. Those are approved by our financial analysis team at the department. There are some big names in there, Ford Motor Company, Dollar General, for instance. Brief update on the Tennessee Insurance Guarantee Association. There have been no new insolvencies since the report of last year. No assessments have been required. They're reporting that they're fully and properly reserved for any future claims. And no adjustments have been made in those reserve amounts. So all good news there. That is our presentation, and I'll leave it to Dawn to get into the meat and potatoes of the data that I know you want to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Can
Any
I ask a
questions?
question?
Go ahead, Mr. Ramos.
Did I understand you correctly to say that the frequency of claims is down, but the administrative cost of the claims is up?
Generally, yes. The litigation expense year over year, resolving the claim, they tend to be more expensive to resolve.
Why?
Well, I'll leave that to the actuaries. I do believe they're going to discuss some of those points for you today, but I'm not an actuary myself.
Are you giving us information for 2024?
Yes, this
Or-
is last year.
And is that a trend that you've seen for prior years as well?
I can't speak to that. I only started covering workers' compensation as of last year.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much, Director, for the good presentation. All right, that brings us to item number 5 on our agenda here, State of the Line presented by Dawn Ingram, State Relations Executive, External and Governmental Affairs, the National Council on Compensation Insurance, NCCI. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Dawn Ingham, and I am NCCI State Relations Executive for Tennessee. I'm happy to be here with you today. Today, I'll be presenting an overview, countrywide overview of the state of the workers' compensation line of insurance. The information that I'm sharing with you today was presented during NCCI's annual Insight Symposium earlier this year. Well, I'll be providing a countrywide overview. Dan Cunningham, NCCI State Actuary, for Tennessee, will be providing Tennessee-specific information to you. So let's get started. This first slide shows the net written premium growth from 2023 to 2024 for various lines of insurance within the property and casualty industry. And as you can see in the first 2 rows, the personal auto and homeowners insurance lines had significant growth in premium. But you'll notice that workers' compensation, shown in blue, is the only line of insurance that had a decline in written premium from 2023 to 2024 of minus 3.2%. So that definitely stands out. And then you'll see on the last row where the total written premium growth for the property and casualty industry came in at 8.8%. Now we're going to focus on workers' compensation net written premium here in this slide. And on the prior slide, the premium amount that I showed you for workers' comp was for private carriers only, where this slide brings in the state fund premium from a countrywide overview. You'll see that the private carrier premium is shown in blue and the state fund premium is shown in orange, and that the data spans from 2004 to 2024. We can observe fluctuations over the years with a peak in 2017, but there has been a slight decline in recent years in premium. The total net written premium for 2024, as shown here on this slide, is $46.3 billion. The presentation slides that I provided to you, you'll see that there's an appendix section. So I included some materials that I'm not going to speak directly to today, but I thought you might be interested. And one of those is you'll find a slide that shows a map of the United States, and it shows the net direct written premium change state by state between 2023 and 2024. Now we're going to delve a little bit further into that workers' compensation premium change by component. And you can see here that this is based on NCCI states for private carriers only. And by private NCCI states, I mean the 38 states for which NCCI provides rate-making services. And of course, that includes Tennessee. The key components shown here include payroll, loss, cost, and mix, carrier departure and schedule rating, and other factors. As far as the other factors, that includes items such as changes in premium audits, deductible credits, change in mix of business, and also change in average experience rating modifications. For the most part, the decrease that you see here in loss, cost, and mix of 8.9% was offset by the payroll increase of 6.5% and the 1.8% increase in carrier departure and schedule rating. Now, moving from direct written premium, we're going to be looking at combined ratios here. And this slide shows the combined ratio for various lines of business, again, within the property and casualty industry. And again, it compares the results from 2023 to 2024. You may recall that the combined ratio is a measure of profitability with a ratio below 100, indicating an underwriting profit. We can see here in the first 2 rows that personal auto and homeowners insurance have improved combined ratios, while in blue you see workers' compensation insurance, and that remained the same. It remained stable at 86%. We also see that workers' compensation has one of the lowest combined ratios in the property and casualty industry. The overall net combined ratio for the property and casualty industry, as shown in the bottom row, improved by 5%, which indicates better underwriting profitability. Again, we're going to focus on workers' compensation insurance here in this slide. And we see the combined ratio for workers' comp from 2004 to 2024. And we see here that the combined ratio has fluctuated over the years, but there's been a notable improvement in recent years, with the most recent 11 years in a row having underwriting profits. The preliminary combined ratio for 2024, as I mentioned before, is 86% for workers' comp, which indicates a stable and profitable line of business. In the appendix, you'll find a slide that shows the workers' comp combined ratio broken down by components of losses, loss adjustment expenses, underwriting expenses, and dividends. And I forgot to mention to you when I was showing you the, I meant to mention to you on the prior slide where I had the combined ratio that there is a slide that shows that by state in the appendix. Now we're going to move on to claim severity. And this is for workers' compensation only. It's private carriers and state funds. And yes,
I'm sorry, quick question. What we're talking about now, this is amongst all 38 NCCI states, correct? This is not Tennessee specific.
right, because NCCI State Actuary Dan Cunningham, he'll provide these Tennessee specific information. I'm just providing the countrywide overview to give you background information on that. So yes, Dan will be the main attraction later today. Anyway, so here we're seeing the lost time claim severity for workers' compensation. And by lost time claim severity, I mean the total cost of a claim when an injured worker received compensation for lost wages for their time that they were unable to work. And this data is presented in thousands of dollars, and it spans from 2004 to 2024. And we can see a steady increase in claim severity over the years, with an increase of 6% from 2023 to 2024. And you'll see in the the far right-hand column for 2024, the average total lost time claim is estimated to be $59,500 compared to 2023 with a lost time claim total lost time claim amount of $56,200.
Ma'am,
Yes.
is my speaker on? It is now.
You're good, Mr. Pitts.
Do I interpret from this claim severity chart, and maybe it's more than this chart, but claims are down, but severity is up? Is that the message you're bringing us?
That is the message I'm bringing you. Yes.
Okay,
Yes, you're correct. And in the appendix, you'll also find a breakdown of lost time claim severity by the indemnity and medical portions of the claim. So it breaks it down a little bit further from what I'm showing you here. And in fact, that's a good segue to the next slide, which talks about lost time claim frequency. So this slide shows the change in lost time claim frequency by accident year for workers' compensation insurance. And again, this is for NCCI states, private carriers, and state funds. And you'll see during this period of time through 2023, the average annual change in claim frequency is a decrease of minus 3.6%. NCCI estimates that lost time claim frequency for 2024 declined by 5%. This is the third consecutive year with a decrease in frequency that's greater than that average annual change of minus 3.6%. This is the last slide of my presentation, and it shows the approved changes in loss costs and rate levels for the voluntary market by state. And this was as of April of 2025. Most of these changes became effective earlier this year or the latter part of last year. And we can see here that most NCCI states had decreases during this period with loss cost level changes ranging from minus 13.5% for Maryland on the far left-hand side of the slide, all the way up to a plus 6.5% for Nevada on the far right side. And Tennessee is located towards the lower range based on last year's approved loss cost level change of minus 3.6%. To conclude my presentation, I just wanted to share with you a quote by
Can I
NCCI's.
interrupt you again?
Yes.
What do we really make out of that slide?
Well,
What are you telling me?
actually, I'm going to tell you right now, this is
Okay.
my
Charge.
ending statement, and I think it'll conclude my presentation very well, and it's a good ending for this slide. This is a quote from our chief actuary, Donald Glenn, at our annual Insight Symposium earlier this year. Her quote is, "The workers' compensation system continues an era of exceptional performance with strong results and a financially healthy line. And while there are early indicators of potential headwinds on the horizon, the industry is well positioned to navigate these challenges." So I think hopefully that answers your question. We're looking at a very stable and strong workers' compensation line of insurance, at least from a countrywide perspective. And then Dan will get into the Tennessee specific information. Thank you for your attention,
All right.
and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your good
Okay, thank you.
presentation. Mhm. All right, that brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, the Tennessee Workers' Compensation Residual Market Administration, presented by Brian Maurer, Director for Plan Administration of NCCI.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, members of the council. It's great to be back here today. Again, as the chairman said, my name is Brian Maurer. I'm the Director of Plan Administration with NCCI, and I'm responsible for the administration of the workers' compensation insurance plans in 23 states, Tennessee being one of them. And as usual, my presentation today is going to focus on the performance of the Tennessee residual market. So you can see here on this first slide, this shows in-force policy premium as of June 30th, 2024, comparing that with June 30th, 2025. You can see here from a policy count perspective, Tennessee is down 11.2%. And from a premium volume perspective, 11.6%. And that is kind of a continuous story that we have seen across the vast majority of our states. Nationally, for the same policy period, from a policy count perspective, our states are down 7.8% policy count year over year and 13.8% from a premium volume perspective. Now, some of the contributors to the decrease in premium are the continual rate decreases. Just a reminder, 3/1/2024, there was an 11.4% decrease in the assigned risk rates. Same thing with March 1st of 2025, another 4.4%. So that is going to have some contributing factors to the premium levels. But the other thing is basically the performance of the voluntary market. It's a very strong standard market, and most of the risks that you would expect to be able to find coverage in the standard market are finding that. And in a few slides, I'll also talk about our depopulation programs, where you'll see some of the performance in that as well. So let's take a look at the loss ratios here. This is 5 years of loss ratios. Obviously, the goal is to have your loss ratio below 1.0. And you can see here, over the last 5 years, the average loss ratio was 0.69. which is very good with the, so if you look back 5 years here, really other than 2023, all within the positive realm that you would want to see from a loss ratio perspective. And let's also look at the net operating results. Obviously from a residual market perspective, self-funding is one of the core tenets of the residual market. So the extent that the residual market can be self-funded and not require the voluntary market to come in and pick up some of the losses, you want to see that. And this slide here, we see the net operating gains over a 5-year period. And you can see for the 5-year result, it's an average net operating gain of $470,000. Really, honestly, if you take out that policy year 2023, it would be even better. This is really good results from an operating perspective. Again, 2020, 2021, you had 3.7 million, 8 million in operating gains. So, we like to see from a 5-year perspective that be in the positive range, and it continues to be that way. So let's look specifically at the policy information. What types of risks are in the Tennessee residual market? And you can see here that the average policy size is 4,504. That is slightly down year over year from last year. Countrywide, across NCCI administered states, it's 3,728. So a little bit higher than the countrywide, but really in the range that we would expect to see here. You can see here I have 79% of the residual market policies in the state of Tennessee have premium under $5,000, which represents 27% of the policies that are in the residual market. So, these are small policy risks that are in the residual market. The servicing carriers or assigned carriers across Tennessee that are responsible for administering these policies, that they primarily deal with small policies. But as you can see here, we do have some larger policies as well. And when we look at the types of applications that come into the assigned risk market, most of them are actually 63% or under $2,500. So these are really small policies, like I said. But you can see here on this chart, if you look at the premium bands, we do have, 168 policies in the 20,000 to 49,999 range. And we have some even higher than that. And we have 2 policies currently that are over 200,000. So like we always tell our carriers that are working these risks, you're going to be working with primarily small policies, but you have to be ready to handle anything because you could get a large policy that would come into the market. This next slide is when we talk about the class codes. These are the top 10 class codes in the Tennessee residual market by policy count. And pretty much these are these are the typical types of codes that you would expect to see in your residual market. And this represents 51% of what's in your residual market at this time. So you can see typical class codes that you would expect to find in your residual market. You're going to have your roofing class codes, your carpentry, construction, painting, tree pruning. Really, if you've seen my presentations over the last couple of years, these codes are very stable of what's in your market. We do have some firefighters. Occasionally, we'll see police in the market as well. When you look at it by premium volume, which represents 45% of the market, it pretty much stays the same. You see police officers come in, excavation, little farming. These are all typical codes that we see across the vast majority of our residual market states. And I am asked quite frequently, with the residual market continuing to shrink, are we getting to that core residual market? And we're getting really close. I mean, I don't know how much further we can go down in terms of, market share, but I think these are pretty much the core types of risks that you would expect to find in the residual market. I want to talk a little bit about depopulation efforts. And, I will just say the state of Tennessee has all of the depopulation programs that NCCI offers, all of them are in place in the state of Tennessee, and that is having a significant impact on managing your residual market as well, and keeping your market, your percentage of employers that are in the residual market low. We have our residual market expiration list, which is on our website, where an agent or insured, if they are looking to market particular policies that are in the residual market, they can go out there and access policies that are information on policies that are expiring in the residual market to see if they can write them in the standard market. You have a retrospective rating program in place called the Loss Sensitive Rating Plan for large accounts. That impacts accounts that are over $250,000 in premium that come into the residual market. They have to participate. It's a mandatory retro program. And that sometimes can be a disincentive from being in the residual market. So it helps them find voluntary market coverage as well. We have the takeout credit program in effect. That is where voluntary market carriers can receive credits on their pool assessments by taking risks out of the residual market. And they get those credits for a period of, I believe, 2 to 3 years. That's in place in the state of Tennessee. You actually have a 3-year non-renewal that's in place in Tennessee, which is a little unique to this state. Not all of our states have that. So basically, if a risk comes into the residual market and after 3 years, they've been with the same carrier, they have to be non-renewed, so that it forces them and their agent to remarket that account, if you will, to get the required declinations to come back in. So that helps manage your residual market as well. We have the TDCI administered Bright Horizons program. And then we have, of course, the Voluntary Coverage Assistance Program. And we put it here under depopulation efforts, but it really, I like to call it a premium, it's a divergent program, if you will. So all of the applications that come into NCCI for residual market coverage, once we evaluate the application, we ensure that they're eligible to come into the residual market. Right before they're bound and they're assigned to one of your assigned risk carriers, we have a number of MGAs and carriers that participate in this program, and there's different underwriting criteria that they indicate, interests that they're looking for accounts. So for instance, they might have certain class codes they're looking to write voluntary market coverage. They might be looking to limit certain experience mods, things of that nature. And if the application meets one of those underwriting criteria, they have the opportunity to look at that account for 48 hours and determine whether they want to write voluntary market coverage. And there's 2 lines on this chart that really stand out. And one of them is really about halfway down when you see confirmed VCAP service policies as a percentage of applications. You can see here 32.9 or 33% of the applications where one of the participants in the program decided to take a look at them, they're actually writing them in the voluntary market. And I always like to look at the redirected assigned risk premium, $4,483,000. That's premium that would have come into the Tennessee assigned risk market that was instead diverted, if you will, to the voluntary market. And, I've been at NCCI working in residual markets for 22 years. And we created the VCAP program right around 2006. And when we created it, we thought a good hit rate would be maybe 3 to 5% when we created the program. And if you look at now, especially in Tennessee, we have 16 VCAP participants. We have 5 direct writers, 11 MGAs that are working the program, representing 32 writing companies. We have a hit rate of 33%. So that is actually keeping your residual market managed levels much lower, because of, just like I said, how good the appetite is in the voluntary market and the success of the VCAP program right now. It's doing a really good job in terms of managing your residual market. So that's the VCAP program. And again, Tennessee residual market share, we have 5-year averages here. Your 5-year average is 5.8%. In 2024, you were at 4%. That's really good. That's historical lows, well below the, believe it's the 15% threshold that this council concerns itself with residual market share. Again, all very positive results. This is residual market written premium. You can see here on this slide how Tennessee compares to our other administered states. A little over 33 million. I believe Zach's slides reference that as well. So you are towards the higher end in terms of the volume of residual market premium, but again, that's been decreasing as well. I think a few years ago you had over 50 million that was in the residual market. Now that's down to 33 million, which is pretty typical, like I said, that we were seeing across all of our states. And finally, let's talk about the Tennessee assigned carriers. They are the assigned carriers, the servicing carriers are in the last year of their 3-year contract. There was a competitive bid process that was run by NCCI, and TDCI selected those 3 servicing carriers you see here for contracts effective 1/1/2023. We have AmGuard Insurance, Liberty Mutual Insurance, and Travelers Insurance. This year, in 2025, we ran at the request of TDCI, we ran another servicing carrier selection process, and the regulator decided to continue with those 3 servicing carriers. So they're going to get new contracts, new 3-year contracts effective 1/1/26. And then Tennessee also allows for direct assignment carriers, where basically those carriers decide not to participate in the reinsurance pool, and whatever their market share is in the state of Tennessee, that's the amount of assigned risk premium that they are going to write in the residual market. And you see those carriers listed there under the direct assignment carriers for 2025. So just in conclusion, like I said, a lot of this is very similar. The Tennessee residual market continues to be stable and manageable. Pretty much all of the applications come through NCCI's online service, 100%, with very positive feedback from our agents and insureds in terms of how that process goes. And the assigned carriers continue to perform well. Just as an aside, as part of being a servicing carrier, and even your direct assignment carriers, there are certain performance standards that they have to comply with. And NCCI does audit the servicing carriers to those performance standards every 3 years. And all of the audits continue to be satisfactory or higher for the servicing carriers. And Mr. Chairman, Council,
All right.
that completes my report.
Any questions? Anyone? Yes, sir. From? Okay. Anybody? All right. No questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the good presentation. All right. That brings us to the next item, which is number 7 here, trends in Tennessee workers' compensation data 2009 to 2023, presented by Hannah Walgen of Elevate Consulting, LLC. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. As you mentioned, my name is Hannah Wolton. I'm the Chief Research and Evaluation Officer with Elevate Consulting. And our role is really to support the council in understanding the impact of the 2013 Workers' Compensation Reform Act. So today my presentation will be around that, and is really provided as a supplementary independent analysis of the data from the statistical data forms. The key questions that are guiding all of our analysis of the data from those statistical data forms include who is receiving compensation, so tracking trends in the demographic characteristics of folks who are receiving claims and benefits, the types of benefits that individuals are receiving, how much folks are being compensated, particularly in those primary benefit areas, how many people are returning to work, what percentage, the trends and conclusion types, and finally, whether or not cases are progressing in a timely manner. For those of you who've been with us for a couple of years, these are the same guiding questions that we use year to year to guide our analysis for this report. Before I dive into the findings, a couple of contextual things about the data that we use. It is a little bit different from some of the other presentations today. All of the data for this presentation and the full statistical report that is available to you all is collected from the statistical data forms, the SD1 and SD2 form, for those of you who are familiar. These are only completed when a case concludes, which means all of the data presented today is on closed cases, so active cases that is not represented in this analysis. The other thing to note is there were changes with the SD form in 2018, so some of the questions were worded a little differently. I'll point out where that affects the analysis later in the presentation, but just to hold that some of that does make the comparison a little bit different as we go through the questions. Other important thing to note, the time frame for this data, for the findings here and in the full report, are cases that had a date of conclusion from January 1st, 2009 through December 31st, 2023. That extra year buffer is to accommodate for some lag time in data entry so that we can get a complete data set. Finally, some exciting things for me, because one of the key analyses that we do is comparing pre and post-reform cases. As you can see, this year we're approaching a more equal distribution across those pre and post-reform cases. Next year, I would imagine we would have almost an equal data set to make that comparison easier too. Let's dig in. Quickly, some demographic information about the folks who are receiving workers' compensation. This has held strong year over year and does not deviate from previous years, really. So the majority of folks who are recipients of claims are between the ages of 45 and 54 years old, have a high school diploma or equivalent, and had an injury in Middle Tennessee. Again, this trends with previous years of this report. For the types of benefits that folks are receiving, the top common benefits continue to be medical expenses, permanent partial disability, and TTD benefits. We do see some changes over time. There's been an increase from pre-reform to post-reform in the number of folks and the percentage of the claims that are accessing medical expenses as well as temporary total disability benefits, and slight decreases in the folks who are accessing permanent partial disability benefits. For this presentation, we have a full breakdown in the full report of the different benefit amounts, but for today, we'll go over the top benefit types. Right now, average medical expenses per claim from pre to post-reform are decreasing slightly. This is a very small decrease. Pre-reform, the average claim or average cost per case was around $23,000. Post-reform, the average is closer to $3,000. That difference is not statistically significant. And again, that's a marginal change. Permanent partial disability, similar to previous years, does have a statistically significant decrease pre to post reform. Pre-reform, the average payout for permanent partial disability was closer to $24,000. Currently, in our post-reform data set, that's closer to $11,700. And finally, for temporary total disability, again, very marginal decrease. This is roughly the same from pre to post reform, and this decrease is not statistically significant. One other thing that I wanted to share with you all that we do in the report is to calculate total compensation. So we essentially calculate the total from the salary-based benefits that folks can receive. And as you see here, there is a decrease, a statistically significant decrease from pre-reform to post-reform in the average total compensation per case. Finally, we also do a little bit of a breakdown across those demographic categories I shared with you earlier to look at who's receiving the most in terms of benefits. Again, these trends are the same as previous years. We haven't seen much of a deviation, but generally workers between 35 and 64 years old are receiving slightly higher average compensation, folks with less than a high school education, and folks with an injury in East Tennessee. Just so you'll have an opportunity to see the breakdown across those categories. As you can see, our red line here is the average compensation per case across all of our data set. And then you can see our age categories for 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and 55 to 64 have a slightly higher than average compensation amount. Similarly, for our education level, folks with less than a high school education have above the average for their compensation. And by Grand Division, our East have just a slightly higher than average compensation for those claims. For return to work, this is one of the places where the form, the SD1 form, the SD4 form did change pretty significantly. On the SD1 form, primarily we're asking whether or not folks return to the same employer, while on the SD2 form, we're asking if folks return to any employer. So for the purposes of this analysis, and because we have most of our data on the SD1 form, we're just using SD1 form data. As you all can see here, we do actually have an increase in folks who are returning to the same employer from pre to post reform. Pre-reform, we were about 58% of folks who were reporting returning to the same employer. And now in our post-reform cases, we're seeing about 72% of folks reporting that they're returning to the same employer. In terms of trends and conclusion types, this is another place where the SD forms change just a little bit. We have gone ahead and recoded some of the data so that we can use the entire data set. If you're interested in how we recoded that full description is in our report. But the primary difference is that on the SD1 form, we had 6 categories for conclusion types, and then on the SD2 form, we only had 2. So we did a little bit of recoding to do the comparison. Pre-reform, the vast majority of these claims were, the conclusion type was settlement reached, complaint not filed, or settlement approved by the Department of Labor. As you can see in this graphic, post-reform, nearly all are settlement approved by the Court of Workers' Compensation claims. And finally, our final question here is whether or not cases are progressing in a timely manner pre and post-reform. To do this, we looked at the average weeks from date of injury to date of maximum medical improvement, as well as the number of weeks between the date of maximum medical improvement and the date of conclusion. So we'll start with date of injury to date of maximum medical improvement. We are seeing significant decreases in the average number of weeks from pre to post-reform. So pre-reform, we were about an average of about 53 weeks, and post-reform, we're down to about 50. The mean number of weeks between the date of maximum medical improvement and the date of conclusion is also decreasing significantly from pre to post-reform. Again, pre-reform, we were at about 44 weeks on average, and post-reform, we were at about 27 weeks in the data set that we currently have available. That concludes my presentation, but I would be happy to answer questions.
All right, any questions? Mr. Ramos?
Ms. Waldron, you went pretty fast.
We did, yeah.
And you speak fast, but I think I understood you. Wow. These things kind of leave me breathless. Your information, first of all, is pre-reform from 2009 to the present through 2024, right?
December 31st, 2023.
2023.
Yes.
And of course, we've had inflation from 2009 through the end of 2023 that everybody talks about almost on a daily basis. Yet the average total compensation, which was the particular slide that stood out, has gone down pretty dramatically from 2009 to the end of 2023. Mm-hmm. What explains that? Can you give me some more information about that? I see it looks like it's been pretty steady as far as a decrease from 2009 through the end of 2023. What factors do you attribute that to primarily?
Yeah. Based on the data that we have in the statistical data forms, slightly to decreases, I think, in the number of folks accessing certain benefits. But other than that, unclear. Oh, yeah. That based on the data set that I have, that's the only additional data I have to describe maybe why some of that decrease is happening, although I imagine that there are other factors at play.
The graph you gave us, or the slide that you gave us, shows a pretty steady increase, but a pretty steady decrease in total benefits paid, but it doesn't really break it down by year. And I'm talking about the total compensation. Was it pretty steady like that, the way you have it depicted in that slide? I'm wondering if the decrease accelerated in the year 2014 when the current statute went into effect.
Yeah. So in the full report, we do have that year over year. There's really not a blip like that. There is like a pretty steady downward trend line year over year. Not necessarily like a clear kind of cut in the way that the data jumps in that graphic.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
I'd be happy to send that page number to you too, if that's helpful.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Ms. Lawyer, go ahead.
At least part of the factor be that there's been a substantial increase in employees that return to the same employer.
I think that's
pre and post, so that would drive their benefits down because they're not seeking TTD as long. and then they're not getting the enhancers from not returning to work for the same employer.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that at least impact it at some point?
I do think that's probably part of the landscape there for sure. I think there was,
And
Yeah.
I have similar questions on the graphs. Mentally, I'm hearing frequency down, severity up, which I'm thinking severity up means higher costs, longer term till MMI. Graphs show something different.
Yeah.
PPD is down, number of weeks is down. This is great, but is there any intel or color behind the why?
I don't-
Severity kind of connotates large costs.
Yeah.
lower costs,
Yeah.
longer time away.
that is one limiting factor we have because we can't control for injury severity with the data set that we have. And so I do think that's a recurring question in terms of how that plays into this data. But yeah, great question.
That's a great observation. So severity is up, but the total benefits paid is down. And then if I understood your slide correctly, the time from the date of the accident to maximum medical improvement has been shortened as well.
That's correct.
Why?
Great question.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely worth some exploration. Certainly, we're a little limited in the data set that we have, but I think some triangulation of the data today is interesting.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah.
question?
Yep.
If we wanted, am I on?
Go ahead.
There you go.
There you go.
If we wanted more information not addressed in your key questions, that is included in the statistical data forms, how would we go about getting it? And really
Yeah.
what I want to know is, as somebody who represents injured workers, we're looking at obvious trends down in benefits. The information I understand from Ms. Ingham earlier was that average total cost of claims nationwide is $59,500. In Tennessee's is hovering at $20,000. Questions about how does someone reach MMI quicker is curious because I don't know that the state of medicine has changed,
Mhm.
right? Attorney representation is something that we all see, particularly people that practice law. Every day we get a report 5 days a week with reported cases, and we see how many of these injured workers are unrepresented.
Mhm.
How can we go about getting data pre and post reform about attorney representation?
Yeah, we've actually gotten this question before and have started looking into that. What we found, and this is something we do a supplemental report just so everyone knows to this as well. So if there are additional questions that you'd like to see if we could address outside of kind of our standard presentation, please let us know. Please email me about those. We will see if we can include those in the supplemental report that comes out at the end of the year. What we found so far with attorney representation, only about 40%, 30 to 40% of the folks in the data set have an attorney listed on the form. So we're currently exploring whether that's representative essentially of the set to look at basically segmenting pre and post reform for folks who had attorney representation versus those who didn't. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you. How does that compare to pre-reform? Do you have
I don't have that number right now, but certainly something we can talk about for the supplemental
so
report.
40% now? That's the most recent figure that you have of all
Yeah.
the workers' compensation claims. Only 40% are represented, but
We'll have an attorney listed. So that
have an
means
attorney
like,
listed.
right,
Okay,
the data was entered.
but
Yeah.
that's a pretty good indicator of representation, I would think. Yes.
I think so.
But do you have the ability to compare that to the pre-reform cases to percentage of representation then, or at least from that same information that you're providing, or the same data that you're providing today?
I think so. Yeah.
Good. Can we get that?
Yeah. I think if that's something that would be helpful to see in the supplemental report, we can certainly include that.
Thank you.
One other quick question. Do you have any idea of what in Tennessee, what amount of cases are medical only versus indemnity?
I don't.
I'd be curious to know that just
Yeah.
because of the 40% piece. I actually thought 40% was high.
I do too.
That's what.
Post.
Denton had a question.
On the SD 1 and 2 forms, attorney fees are listed. Could you pick up the data from that? Because that would answer your question.
Yeah.
There's no attorney fee in that section and no attorney listed, then that would give you an indicator that it was. And also in the data set, there's a box for perm partial disability, perm total disability. If those blanks are zero, if those are zero, then that would tell you the ones that are medical only.
Mm.
Will you key in on those three areas and give us a report on that?
I think that's certainly data we can ask, we can request.
Once again, that 40% figure does sound high. And one of the things I'm basing that on is because I'm not down there at the Court of Workers' Compensation Claims on a daily basis, but I see the appeals. I read the appeal decisions, and I'm just astounded by how many are going through that appeals process, which is complicated to me as an attorney. And they're unrepresented. They're going through that appeals process, and I can't tell you how many cases are basically thrown out because they call them pro se claimants. They're unrepresented. Those appeals are thrown out or basically dismissed because the claimants have not done what they're supposed to do to get those cases up on appeal and to have them properly considered by the court on appeal. So I'm really interested in that 40% figure. If whatever additional information you could provide would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
That's the purpose of the supplemental report. So any questions like that, please let us know so that we can include those.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions? Any further questions today? Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson.
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank
report. All right, next we're at item number 8 here, the Tennessee Workers' Compensation Voluntary Loss Cost and Assigned Risk Rate Filings, proposed to be effective March 1, 2026, presented by Dan Cunningham, Executive Director and Actuary in CCI. That would be the legendary Dan Cunningham. Okay.
We're so excited.
All right. Thank you all, Council and Chairman. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm worried that we set the bar too high with some of the comments previous to this presentation, but I promise that I'll do my best. My name is Dan Cunningham. I'm an FCAS and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. I am an Executive Director and Actuary at NCCI. I have been State Actuary for Tennessee for 8 years. This will be my 8th filing. And I am lucky enough, this is the first year actually I brought my whole family here and we did a tour of the state capitol. I found out that you guys are the only state capitol building with any dead bodies buried in the ground, which was probably the most interesting fact for my children on the tour. All right, I'm going to talk to you all today about the filings that were just served this afternoon. But before then, I'm going to give you some of that Tennessee experience that Dawn spoke to on a national basis. So these are the Tennessee work comp combined ratios. And the combined ratios that she talked to on a countrywide basis, both for workers' compensation and on other lines of business of insurance, these are often used as a barometer of kind of the health of the industry in a given state. As you can see here in Tennessee, similar to a countrywide experience, we have had unprecedented combined ratio experience here in Tennessee over the past 10 years. So again, when we're looking at these combined ratios, they're on a calendar accident year basis. And that means that we're taking all of the premium that came in on a given calendar year and comparing it to the costs associated with handling the claims that occurred within the accident year. And so for every dollar in, dollar out would be 100 combined ratio. Combined ratios above 100 are going to represent an underwriting loss, and combined ratios under 100 represent an underwriting gain. And what we're showing here is that Tennessee has had 10 consecutive years of underwriting gains with combined ratios below 100. This was previously unprecedented, but we have seen it on a countrywide basis. We see it here for Tennessee as well. I am highlighting the latest 2 years of combined ratios in Tennessee for your information. You can see here that we have seen an uptick in the combined ratio in Tennessee. The 2023 combined ratio of 86 has increased in 2024 to a 95. And this is a calendar accident year basis, which means the accident year losses and expenses are estimates and could change. But it does give you a feel that it does look like we have worsening results, from a combined ratio perspective for the latest year. However, still below that 100 level currently in Tennessee. And the green up top giving you the portion, the experience of the combined ratio that's related to the underwriting expenses and dividends. The blue bar on the bottom showing you what portion is related to the loss and the LAE, the loss adjustment expenses. And so you can see here the deterioration, the increase in the combined ratio from 23 to 24, primarily driven by an increase in that blue portion, the loss and LAE ratio. Getting into our voluntary loss costs and assigned risk rate filings in Tennessee. Today, we have filed for a 2% decrease in the voluntary market in Tennessee. That 2%, I'm going to walk through the different components that are driving it. But the four main buckets that we talk about each year, experience and development, this is your primary driver of the change year after year in Tennessee. This is contributing minus 2.8% to the overall impact. When we talk about experience and development, we tend to lump them together. Just for reference, the experience is actually a little bit more negative, about 3.8, with a slight uptick in development that combined to give us that minus 2.8%. Once again, we are basing our experience for Tennessee for policy years 2022 and 2023. These are our two latest full policy years. I'll get into more details on them in a minute. We do have an increase in our trend selection this year for Tennessee, specifically in our indemnity loss ratio trend component. Last year, we had a minus 4.5% annual trend. We are increasing that to minus 4%. And so that is giving us an increase of 0.7% on the indication. Our medical loss ratio trend of minus 6% from last year has been carried forward, so no change there. We have included a medical schedule update, a med fee update, which is effective 4/1/2025. It is a part of the filing package. It was priced. There are different moving components to it, but the overall impact is 0%. So we have included that, but it does not change our indication. And finally, there is a small change to our loss-based expense provision, our loss adjustment expenses. We are increasing the provision from 19.7% to 19.8%. So before I get further into the components, just to give you a feel for how the 2% proposed this year compares to our latest 5 years of changes in Tennessee. As you can see here, this is the least negative change we have proposed in the latest 5 years. Obviously, with double digit in 2023, back-to-back years of some larger decreases at that time, followed by a more moderate decrease last year and an even, smaller change this year. For that experience and development component, I mentioned already that we are using the latest 2 policy years. I'm going to try not to get into too much details here, but feel free to ask any questions if you are interested. But just as a quick, brief refresher, when we say policy year, we're talking about all of the data for premium and losses related to policies written in a given year. And so we like to use the latest 2 full policy years for Tennessee. We think policy years is the best match of kind of premium to losses for policies. And the 2 years, I think, is indicative of the size of Tennessee. Tennessee is a relatively large state. Most NCCI states use 2 or 3 years, with a couple of notable exceptions that go beyond 3 years for very, very small states. And so for Tennessee, we have historically relied upon a 2-year experience period. We continue to feel that that is appropriate. Given the size of Tennessee, it allows us to be responsive to the data as it's coming in. For reference, we obviously review a wide spectrum of information and data at our, what's available to us. We did look at a 3 and even a 4 and a 5 year. All of those permutations, all of those longer experience periods would have been a more negative indication. So we are seeing the latest 2 years kind of coming up a bit. And by using the 2-year experience period, we are being responsive to that data. When we're talking about those experience periods, we use 2 different loss development bases for them. The first is a paid basis, where we're going to look at all of the dollars paid out on claims from carriers. The second is a paid plus case basis. So the paid plus case is going to incorporate not just the paid dollars, but also the case reserves that the carriers believe the claim will ultimately be. We develop those on using their own basis. For paid, these development averages tend to be a bit more stable, and so we tend to be more responsive with a 2-year average. The 2-year average we have used for pretty much as long as I've been on Tennessee. For paid plus case, historically, paid plus case has been seen as a more volatile development method, simply because you have case reserves which are more subject to change, both upward and downward by carriers in response to changing environments. That being said, in Tennessee, we haven't really seen that much volatility. And so within the last couple of filings, we've been slowly kind of moving to a more responsive development metric for those. And last year, we used a 3-year average for the paid plus case for both indemnity and medical. We continue to feel that the 3-year average is appropriate, and it was maintained for the filing this year. Really quick here, I'm going to try to show you on this grid. I know it's a whole bunch of numbers. But the idea here is to give you a feel for kind of the different elements that we're looking at and how they come together to give us our overall indication. So going top to bottom, that's the difference between the paid and the paid plus case that I mentioned at the just previously. And going left to right, we're showing you the first policy year 2022, the newest policy year 2023, and then the average. And so this just lets you kind of see what we're seeing when we look across these different experience years and these different metrics. And so broadly speaking, both policy years are supporting a decrease. -1.3 for policy year 2022, -3.0 for policy year 2023. So slightly different decreases, but averaging out to the -2, and overall, I'd say fairly close together. When we look at the paid and the pay plus case, we do see more of a divergence, with the pay plus case indicating a larger decrease. I would say the magnitude of the difference between these two is on par with what we have historically seen in Tennessee. However, it is notable that we have come so close to zero, the decreases become less significant and a smaller magnitude, that the paid is actually indicating a small increase. And so again, though, we average those two together to give us the -2.1. The reason the -2.1 doesn't match the overall -2 is this does not include that loss adjustment expense change of 0.1%. Getting into trend, the next component, and I think a very important selection that we make every year in Tennessee. We make a selection of our indemnity and medical loss ratio trends for our expectation as to how those loss ratios will change in the future, with the costs relative to payroll. And for the graph here, green up top, showing you the historical medical loss ratio changes over time, the blue on the bottom showing the indemnity loss ratios over time. And before even getting into any details or anything really specific, at a high level, hopefully it's easy enough to take away from this image that both of them are negative. They are coming down over time, that the indemnity is less negative and more flat, with the medical being a bit more volatile, but overall still coming down. And so again, supporting our medical selection of a -6% and our indemnity selection of a -4%. I will say that we do have more years of data available, but with the indemnity, we know that Tennessee Senate Bill 200 had a significant impact on the environment for accident 7114 and forward. So we tend to focus indemnity on 2015 and forward to try to be responsive to the information as we see it coming out. Historically, indemnity was actually more negative. And what we have seen kind of since 2015 and forward, a flattening out. And responsibly, we have been adjusting our indemnity loss ratio trend as that information comes in, not wanting to overreact to the information in the beginning, unclear as to what might be one-time impacts versus persistent, sustained impacts. And what we see here is that year after year after year, we're seeing very consistent results on the indemnity side, making us feel more comfortable being more responsive with our trend selection and dropping that down to a -4. Versus the medical, which we do look at short, mid, long-term fits for medical. All of these metrics are strongly supporting our current medical trend of -6%. Really quick, just to give you a little bit more information underlying these trend selections, because they are very important. Those loss ratios that I just shared are made up of two different components, frequency and severity. Frequency shown in orange. When we're speaking to frequency here, we're talking about how often the claims occur, right? We do that relative to premium to have it kind of an apples to apples basis over a historical time period. And we are talking about specifically lost time claims. For the blue and the green, those are the severity portions. And so since the orange frequency portion underlies both our indemnity and medical loss ratios, the difference in our selection is really driven by the difference in their severities. So as you can see here on this graph, the Tennessee claim frequency has been coming down year after year at a consistent clip and is the main driver of the negative loss ratio trends that we have in Tennessee. That is not unique to Tennessee. I would say that that is more or less the staple of what we see across all of our NCCI states. We continue to see frequency decline coming down again, even in the latest few years. Going to the severity side, once again, green up top is the medical, blue on the bottom for indemnity. And again, you can see here what's driving kind of the differences in our selections. I will say here, these are all these are our changes in claim severity. I know we've talked a little bit recently about changes in claim severity from our different presentations. These have been adjusted for wages. And so this has been kind of on leveled for that effect. And so what we see here for indemnity is relatively flat claim severity. And again, that is relative to wages. So that's just letting you know that over this time period from 2015 to 2023, claim severity and wage increases have kind of offset each other. On the medical side, again, a bit more volatility. We do see that drop in 2020, which may or may not be related to COVID, impacts at that time. But overall, we do see medical coming down over this time period, whereas indemnity relatively flat to potentially even a small uptick in the latest 2 years. So once again, this graph just combining that frequency and severity component again, but what we've done here on the far right is show you what our projected indemnity and medical loss ratios are using those selected trends of -4 for indemnity, -6 for medical, and applying them to the latest 2 points, which is our experience period. And hopefully at a high level, looking at this, you can see our projections appear to be reasonable. The LAE provision this year, very minor change, just overall increase from 19.7% to 19.8%, very small update. Last year, we actually had a sizable increase driven by both components changing. This year, almost equal, just a small 0.1% increase. So that concludes my comments on the voluntary indication of -2%. I'm going to talk briefly about our assigned risk rate change, which has been proposed as a -1.1%. So a small decrease, a little bit less negative than our voluntary. The voluntary is the starting basis for our assigned risk change. Built on top of that is the change to the assigned risk multiplier. In Tennessee last year, our assigned risk multiplier was a 1.809. And that's made up of a number of individual components. Going through the important ones very quickly, you'll see here that we're not making any significant changes to the assigned risk multiplier at this time. The assigned risk loss cost differential, which is kind of our selection of how much worse the assigned risk experience looks than its voluntary counterpart, remains at a 1.45, no change from the prior year. Uncollectible premium provision is the additional premium that we adjust upwards for with the expectation that not all the premium in the assigned risk market will be collected in order to maintain it being self-funded. No change to the current provision of 1.055. P&C provision is a profit and contingency component that we build into the assigned risk rate. No change to the current 0%. So we are not changing any of the significant selections or any of the main components to the assigned risk multiplier. We did update the expenses with the new SCA expense and a few other items. That small update had a 0.9% increase, which raises our multiplier from 1.809 to 1.826. Combined with the 2% decrease in the voluntary loss costs, gives us our proposed -1.1% for assigned risk. And again here, just showing you the latest 5 years of both voluntary and assigned risk changes in Tennessee. So you can see how our current 1.1% for assigned risk looks comparatively. And similar story to the voluntary side, a much more moderate, smaller change than our prior 5 years. And that concludes my planned comments for today, but I am more than happy to speak to any element that anyone has any questions on.
Any questions, Mr. Cunningham? Surely there are questions.
I got a question.
Yeah, Mr. Pitts, you got a question?
Yes, sir.
Take the mic.
This is asking you to make a prediction you're not going to be willing to make. But as I look at your data, and with present trending, one could make a reasonable argument that if you had the same economic factors between the last 2 years or the following 27 years, there's a pretty good possibility that you all would be coming in not asking for a further reduction, but for an increase. Is that not a distinct possibility?
So it's a fair question. I think a lot of folks are curious, especially when we file a smaller decrease like this. Is there a potential turn coming? Is something going to change in the near future? I obviously do not know the future, Mr. Pitts. If I did know the future, yes, I'd be doing something a little bit different than my current position. But in my opinion, if you're looking for kind of a reasonable expectation of what the future might hold, all else equal, as you say, there's obviously other factors at play, such as the economy and inflation, severity, all sorts of different metrics. But basically, all else equal, my expectation every year is that if our trends are accurate and they don't need to be adjusted again in the prospective year, that the upcoming filings should be close to what those trends are indicating. And so again, in Tennessee, my trends are -4% for indemnity, -6% for medical. All else equal, that would be my a priori for a subsequent year. That experience coming in similar to that. Obviously, there's volatility, there's unforeseen circumstances, and there could be an increase. But my expectation is that the trends are going to be indicative of what I would expect to see in a prospective year.
So what was your answer?
Maybe. But I would say probably not.
All I was doing is for new people on this advisory council. You've been through 4 or 5 years in which we come in and face this with the possibility of a loss cost reduction. And in fact, that's what has occurred. And I would just sort of laying out there that the future may not be the same as the past 5 years. That's all.
All right.
Can I ask one thing?
Yes, Mr. Ramos.
That won't be long.
It's all right.
Mr. Cunningham, on the Tennessee claim frequency that you had out there before, I think that was on slide 9 or page 9. There it is. Let me say this. You started out that information from 2015 and took it through the end of 2023. And we see once again a pretty steady decrease that you talked about. I didn't hear you say anything about the reasons behind that claims frequency decrease. Did I not hear that, or?
No, I don't think I really offered any particular insight into that. So I'm happy to speak to it. I mean, obviously, I think there are certain things ubiquitous across workers' compensation across the nation. Obviously, increases in automation, workplace safety. And again, the thing to note that this is frequency per $1 million of on-level premium, right? So we're trying to put everything kind of on an apples to apples basis. And so what this is really saying is that all the premium historically brought up to today's level, if everything was kind of written as of today, that yes, we would have lower frequency compared to historical. So I think there's all sorts of things like that. obviously some questions coming out of COVID. You see that kind of momentary blip around 2020 where maybe it started to flatten off, which appears to be an aberration and has continued to decrease since there. There's obviously thoughts about the current state of the world and working today and the increased amount of hybrid and remote work and how that might still be something beyond just a one-time change and could change the way that people work going forward. Changes in the mix of business and the types of operations that are done. And again, just the safety of all of that. So, I mean, I think those are some of the standard responses. And then beyond that, for me, it's generally speaking to the fact that wages go up and work is either getting safer or not, or equally dangerous as to how it was previously.
Well, we keep on hearing about the severity of the claims going up, right? Which is kind of contradictory to the claim frequency going down.
Right.
All right, and I guess I was considering your chart there in conjunction with what Ms. Wolchin was talking about before. When she talked about the data in her report, she talked about pre-reform claims during the 5.5 year period from 2009 to July 1st, 2014. That's when the Reform Act came into place.
Sure.
So that's a 5.5 year period. And the claims there were 88,355 claims, workers' compensation claims. And then she also gave us the number of claims post-reform. And that's not a 5.5 year period, that's a 9.5 year period. Because now we're talking about July 1st, 2014 through the end of 2023. That's a 9.5 year period.
Sure.
So 5.5 year period in her information that she gave us pre-reform, 9.5 year period that she gave us post-reform. Yet the pre-reform claims for that 5.5 year period were 88,355 compared to only 69,605 claims during a 9.5 year period post-reform. I did the math, and that's 18,750 fewer claims, even though it's a longer period. It's a 4-year longer period. A lot of that, you didn't mention the heightened causation standards in the workers' compensation reform law that went into effect in July of 2014. But that's got to play a pretty predominant role as well. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. I mean, it's definitely a factor. It's at play. We had done post-reform analyses following the Tennessee Senate Bill 200 enactment. And we no longer follow up with that, but my recollection of the data that we had analyzed aligned very much with what was shared, here today and what you're quoting now, Mr. Ramos.
I've been arguing all along that fewer attorneys now are representing injured claimants in workers' compensation, which Bob Pitts told us on the record a few meetings ago was the whole purpose of the Reform Act, and it worked. It's also harder for pro se claimants, the ones who are unrepresented, to file their own claims, and that could account for that drastic decrease in the claim frequency as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely an element as to how much it's a factor versus other factors. I couldn't speak to it, but I would not disagree that is present within here. I will say this period is 2015 and forward, so we are seeing kind of post Senate Bill 200. And so obviously, if you went back to the prior years, you would see even more decreases as to what you're speaking to.
And then considering all what we heard about before, that the workers' compensation insurance business in Tennessee is in good shape. Fewer claims, fewer payouts, fewer attorneys to contend with. It's not much of a secret, is it?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments. I think as far as,
Well, you're the star. You just want to call it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments here today on this? All right. Thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate your good report here. All right. Let's see. Opportunity for public comment. Item number 9 on our agenda here. Is there any public comment for the advisory council today? Seeing none, let the record reflect that there is none. And other business, item number 10 here. Let's see. Kevin McNellis, our procedure going forward, what would that be from your standpoint? We've got comments we need to supply if the board wishes to do that.
Well, generally speaking, I mean, we'll have the council's actuary and then Commerce and Insurance's actuary. They'll need about a month or so to review this filing, and then we'll try to reconvene a little bit after that. So just be on the lookout for, me poking everybody, asking for y'all's availability for, let's say, late October, but more realistically, probably early November.
So take all this data home with you tonight and look at it real closely and think about it and dream about it overnight and all the rest, because there will be a test on this in the future and we have to do comments on this. All right. So we'll look forward to that sometime probably in later October. So anybody have any other business to come before the council today? Seeing none, the chair.
Move to adjourn.
All right. I'll second that. You beat me to it. You son of a
Still
gun.
running.
All right. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you for your service to the council and to the people of Tennessee.
Yes, they don't have as big a pieces of pie as they used to.
Sorry to ramble on, JV, but boy, this just
Well, I almost put one in